Hello and welcome to the dev server for the War Thunder Starfighters update. In this video we're going to take a look at something that has not yet drawn so much attention, this being the newly added Japanese helicopter line. This tech tree is formed of 4 helicopters, 3 of which are researchable and 1 of which is a premium. To start off, we're going to look at said premium fairly briefly, as this has already been in the game for a fair while. So the premium helicopter is of course the AH-1S Kisarazu. This was added last year in patch 1.89, so basically a full year ago. This vehicle has seemingly though been moved down to tier 6 to allow for efficient research of the tier 7 AH-64 DJP. The Kisarazu is essentially the same as the tech tree AH-1S, with the only difference being a historical anime skin, although not to worry if anime is not your thing, this does come free of charge with a standard camouflage as well. Being identical to its tech tree counterpart though, the Kisarazu does of course get a thermal sight and can use the TOW-2 anti-tank guided missile, an improved version of the TOW missile. It does not have any air-to-air missiles for itself, but it can defend against them using the 30 flares that it has, which are mounted near the back of the tail boom, essentially. We will cover this with a little bit more detail when we look at the tech tree AH-1S. But before we do that, we must of course look at the starter helicopter. This helicopter will not require research, but it will cost Silver Lions to purchase, and to be able to purchase this you will need to have either a tier 5 aircraft or a tier 5 tank for Japan. So this is also a Cobra variant, the AH-1S Early, and is essentially a downgraded version of the later 2 Cobras in this line. The AH-1S Early has a variety of weapons, including FFAR Mighty Mouse unguided rockets with 2 pod sizes, and of which up to 76 can be mounted. M134 minigun pods are also available to be fitted, with 2 of these being able to be fitted on the inner pylons on the stub wings. And finally, the TOW-1 ATGM is going to be the primary anti-armor weapon for the AH-1S Early, with a range of 3 kilometers, 630 mil of best effective pen, and a maximum velocity of 296 meters per second. Up to 8 of these can be mounted, with up to 4 of them on each of the end wing pylons, although the first modification for these missiles will only allow for 4 to be mounted overall. As with all other AH-1S, AH-1F, and I believe also the Viper, the helicopter features a nose-mounted M197 20mm cannon. This is mounted in a turret and will come in handy when fighting against air targets or lighter enemy ground targets, thanks to the reasonable armored target belts for this gun. This gun also remains the same on the later 2 variants in this tech tree. The armor on the AH-1S is fairly minimal, consisting of composite armor seats and then some 12mm steel around the pilot and then also around the engine. This armor also remains the same on the later 2 Cobra variants in this tech tree. Now, unlike its later counterparts, the AH-1S Early lacks a thermal sight, although it does still maintain night vision. It also lacks the flare pack that can be found on the later versions. This will of course leave the 1S Early at risk when facing IR guided missiles, although of course you can still use unguided rockets and ATGMs to try and distract the missile or prevent a lock. Final thing to note is that the AH-1S does have 2 camouflage options. Firstly, the standard Japanese tricolor paint scheme, which personally I like, but it gets a bit boring when it's on all the helicopters. And the second skin is a more winter-like dual color scheme, which personally is the skin that I prefer on this helicopter. Now moving on to this tech tree's tier 6 researchable helicopter. This will be the first helicopter you actually have to research. This is just the AH-1S. This is identical to the Kisarazu and is essentially an upgrade when compared to the earlier version in the tech tree. So this is very similar to the AH-1S Early as said, but with a few distinguishing features. Firstly, this version has the ability to fire the more advanced TOW-2 anti-tank missile. This comes with a range increase to almost 4 kilometers compared to the 3 kilometers on the earlier version, a velocity increase to 329 meters per second, and a best effective pen improvement, now being able to go through 900 millimeters of armor. Other weapon options do though remain the same, with the Mighty Mouse rockets being available and the M134 miniguns, and then also the TOW-1 still being available for use and actually needing to be researched before you can research the TOW-2. As with the previous version, this also mounts the M197 in a nose turret, and the armor is also the same configuration as the 1S Early. The AH-1S also gains access to a thermal sight, which will certainly come in handy when trying to spot enemy targets, and it also has access to a radar warning receiver, which will be very useful when trying to spot and avoid enemy anti-aircraft vehicles. As for defense, the AH-1S gets the flare pack that was mentioned earlier, containing 30 flares and being mounted on the tail boom. This will ideally be able to defeat a few air-to-air missiles before running out of flares. Final thing for this helicopter is to mention that the AH-1S does have a secondary camouflage option. First camouflage is the standard paint scheme for the Japanese, only with a shark mouth, which is nice to see for a stock skin. And then the second scheme is the standard camo, but with a large Cobra printed on either side of the fuselage. So now moving down into Tier 7, we have the AH-64 DJP. This is the Japanese license-built version of the AH-64D Apache longbow, and in War Thunder it sees no significant difference from its American counterparts. The main guided weapon consists of the AGM-114K Hellfire II. This missile has 8 kilometers of range, a max velocity of 475 meters per second, and 1,200 millimeters of best effective penetration. Now, the Hellfire is of course guided via a laser designator and will commonly use a top-down attack path. Up to 16 of these Hellfires can be mounted, with 4 of them on each pylon. The air-to-air missiles on the AH-64 DJP consist of the AIM-92 Stinger. Only 10 Gs of overload on this missile, but it does have a decent lock range in all aspects, and a fairly decent top speed of 1,000 meters per second. The Stingers are not really the best air-to-air missiles, but having 4 of them should allow you to somewhat defend yourself from enemy aircraft. Your gun is of course the M230 chain gun. This can be rather effective when taking down air and ground targets alike, especially considering that the gun can be locked onto a target and will then automatically lead that target accordingly. The max effective range seems to be around 3 kilometers, but it will work best when within 1 kilometer. The rounds fired by this gun are actually fairly effective at destroying lighter enemy ground units, and even some MBTs if fired through the top of the turret. This helicopter does have access to Hydra 70s. They are decent unguided rockets, and they are actually essentially the same as the Mighty Mouse rockets that we discussed earlier. As far as additional features go, you get radar warning receivers, so you will be warned of any radar signature that's nearby. You also have some flares. You can hold 30 of them in the same flare pack that's used on the later AH-1S models. The helicopter does of course also feature a thermal sight and night vision, and seemingly also has built-in exhaust suppression. Of course, the AH-64 DJP does have access to the longbow fire control radar, which currently in War Thunder acts more like a search radar, though may be useful when the AGM-114L is eventually added to this helicopter. The radar has 2 modes, air-to-ground and air-to-air, with 2 range settings in each of those modes, and various focus levels when in the ground mode. Unfortunately, there are no interesting secondary camouflage options for this helicopter, but I might say that the Japanese camo does look rather nice on the Apache. Well, that is pretty much it for the Japanese helicopter tree. Fairly small line due to the limited options as far as attack helicopters go. There are a few other helicopters that may join these in the future, but their payloads will be fairly limited, mostly to unguided rockets. Anyway though, that'll be it from me on this topic. Thank you very much for watching. I will probably be putting out some more videos on these helicopters one by one when the update drops and when I actually get around to grinding out the tech tree and spading the helicopters. Hopefully you did enjoy, hopefully you got the information you wanted. If you have any more questions, ask them in the comments. I will try and give a fairly decent answer. Of course, if you did enjoy the video, please consider dropping a like, maybe even subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.